What is meant by the paradigm shift that is now said to be required for the survival of agriculture and therefore human civilization? One way to understand the need for a paradigm shift is to examine the current debates in the recent evolution of global agriculture. Around the world, agribusiness firms have radically changed what is meant by agriculture in the last few decades. Agriculture has been transformed from a biological process, essentially, into an industrial process in the eyes of the large firms that have come to dominate the global food system. The global food system is now the industrial sector that drives decisions about agriculture around the world. Signs of this process are apparent in the business press. Big Pharma has bought up Big Ag, and this has led to even bigger pharma with potentially fatal ecological consequences for both human health and the health of the global ecosystem. You all know about Bayer aspirin. Well, Bayer is a large pharmaceutical firm that has bought up Monsanto. And as the headline put it, two deadly corporations now become one. Monsanto is, after all, the company that owns the most patents on the world's food supply. That is, patents on the seeds that make it possible to grow food. In fact, they've been the ones engineering seeds to respond to the particular package of fertilizers that they've devised for it, as well as to be resistant to the glyphosate herbicide that is applied to the entire field with spraying from the air. Developing seeds that respond to their chemical additives and chemical dosages of poisons has meant that they in fact control a great many of the output production lines throughout the world. Corporations and land speculators are everywhere buying up all available arable land in order to extract short-term profit in the rush to make a profit from the expanding food demand around the world. This is what is driving the new scramble for territory in Africa. There has been, of course, resistance to this land grabbing. It is a scramble, but people are resisting in Africa this corporate land rush. And in addition, the agro-meta-narrative. The agro-meta-narrative is very interesting. AGRA stands for the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. It's an organization that is explicitly attempting to extend the Green Revolution to Africa. Norman Borlaug himself never got to work extensively in Africa, but after his death, many of his followers tried to, in a sense, extend his presence into the continent of Africa by promoting the petro-intensive techniques that he pioneered. Let's take a look at AGRA and its meta-narrative, asking, what is it to begin with? You'll remember from our discussion previously that there is a kind of meta-narrative, a large-scale story that is being put forward by the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. The Alliance was created in 2006 with the goal of bringing high-yield agricultural practices to 30 million smallholder farmers throughout the continent. With the adoption of commercial seeds and inorganic fertilizer, AGRA set out to double crop productivity and incomes while having food insecurity by the year 2020. As AGRA reaches its self-declared deadline, in fact, now has passed it. How well is it done in terms of increasing productivity, incomes, and food security? Well, we saw last time it hasn't done that well in terms of these goals. You can catch up with them on their YouTube channel. They have quite an effort to have a public posture here, and you can look it up under the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. Who is behind it? Well, we discussed this briefly last time. It's received roughly $1 billion in funding, two-thirds of it from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and dispersed more than $500 million in grants, mainly in 13 priority African countries. The Green Revolution Technology Campaign has been supported during this time by other international programs from Europe and the World Bank and the United States that were in fact far larger than AGRA itself, notably by the national governments in Africa itself, which has spent roughly $1 billion per year on programs that subsidize the purchase of commercial seeds and fertilizers. The key to this new alliance, the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa, amounts to an alliance to distribute genetically modified seeds in some cases, in other cases, straightforward seed and fertilizers that have been developed to increase the production of these special seeds. Now, we saw briefly how they presented their case last time, the AGRA story as it was called, and we can review just the beginning of it again.
My mother used to use this, and her mother. And before that, more mothers, going back hundreds and hundreds of years. It could have been the exact same one for all I know. People say Africa is a continent of tomorrow. To me, this seems a lot like yesterday. But it doesn't have to be this way. Farming can be more than an existence. It can be a business. We don't have to just survive. We can thrive. Follow me. Crops will always face danger from diseases. But these people are crop scientists. They work both here in the lab and outside in the field, looking for ways to make the seeds disease resistant. And our smarter farming doesn't always have to be so scientific. Look at this ugly thing. Cassava is an important crop, but once it's picked, you have 72 hours before it's useless. But this machine gives us time. Once it's chipped and dried, the cassava is good for 24 months. It means we no longer have to accept the price that someone will pay at the farm gate. We can control and manage the harvest. Now we can set the price.
Now we can set the price, she says. And if that were true, it would be very attractive. The trouble is, it's not altogether true. It rests upon a kind of narrative, a narrative that's a bit mythological. So it's worth looking at the premise and components of the AGRA meta-narrative about African agriculture. You'll remember that its components, traditional Africa agriculture, according to this meta-narrative, was not a business. As she put it, this seems a lot like yesterday, but it doesn't have to be this way. Farming can be more than an existence. It can be a business. We don't have to just survive. We can thrive. Well, you can find out more about the AGRA narrative about African agriculture on their own YouTube channel. It's pretty fanciful in many respects. Basically, it argues that prior to the arrival of science, there was no systematic agriculture in Africa. In fact, they're looking at the fact that it's only since this newly integrated, scientifically directed agriculture that things have started to happen. But we have to ask, what are decisions about what's to be grown and how it is to be grown? How are those decisions going to be made in this new system? Who has effective control in a circumstance like this with a scientifically directed agriculture? You see her in a lab suit there, she's put on as she's walked in from the field, and there are as many people in this lab than are out in the field. It's pretty extraordinary, this new kind of meta narrative about African agriculture. Showcase for the Green Revolution strategies were put forward in a project called the Bukanga Lonzo project in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. You can see from snapshots even what it's all about. They refer to it as un potentiel agricole exceptionnel, Bukanga Lonzo sector. And then there's a big picture of a chemical truck bringing in pesticides and herbicides for use in this kind of agriculture.
La République démocratique du Congo possède 80 millions d'hectares de terres arables, dont 4 millions sont irrigables. Notre pays a un vaste réseau hydrographique et une diversité climatique offrant des conditions extraordinaires pour une grande variété de cultures. Nous disposons des ressources pastorales capables de supporter 40 millions de bovins et des ressources halieutiques pouvant permettre un approvisionnement annuel d'environ 700 000 tonnes de pêche. Nous avons de grands défis à relever.
Well, you can get the idea
Sécuriser et
here.
moderniser les
The
systèmes de
publicity
production
about this is
agricoles.
that there
Mobiliser
are
des
vast new
investissements conséquents
resources
permettra une
available in the
modernisation d'un
Congo
pays,
that
vaincre la
need
malnutrition.
only to be used with mechanical techniques and motorized agriculture that can clear vast surfaces of land and create, in effect, new industries based, in this case, on imported technology for irrigation of lands in this area where new quantities of foodstuffs can be grown, not only for the cities in Africa, but potentially for export to other parts of the world. It's a kind of dream state of how you can put together pivot agricultural systems to, in effect, feed the population more adequately and develop the kind of industrial agriculture that's been developed in the West, heavily dependent on teams and teams of tractors, all of which have to, of course, be obtained from abroad. None of them are produced locally in the Congo, but everything is presented as if this is an unquestioned benefit for the African country concerned, in this case the Congo, and that new forms of maize, beef cattle, pork, all sorts of grains can be grown on this new irrigated soil and becomes the new development goal, as they put it. Joseph Kabila Kabange said, basically, we can transform Congolese agriculture from a subsistence basis to one based on basically a model that can be a motor for economic development in a global context. This is the ideal. The Bukanga Lonzo project drew attention to itself because the Democratic Republic of the Congo thought it would be a great success. They gave it a lot of publicity, and in fact, it's worth looking at in detail for that reason. They had an admirable goal, and it was to secure the food well-being of the population, as they put it, bien-être alimentaire de la population. But after a few years' operation, when the ministers actually went out and inspected the operation, it was a deplorable failure, as they in fact called it. They came out there in their suits and tried to look at what was going on, in the field, and they were shocked to find that, yes, the images from the archives had bountiful harvesting machines bringing in lots of surplus maize in this case, and wheat as well. But when they looked at the underground situation, there were thousands of pounds of unused agricultural inputs, including seeds and fertilizers. They were just sitting in sheds, rotting and deteriorating. And then there were the agricultural machinery brought in from abroad, from Massey Ferguson and other providers, um, that had never been used. Brand new machines that had never been used were just being kept in barns. And in fact, they were shocked, as they say. Sylvestre Ilunga s'étonne de l'état déplorable de ce parc industriel. And in fact, some of the machines were taken apart and the motors in them were used by local populations for other reasons altogether. So it's worth looking at the whole thing. Not surprisingly, as such a high profile project, Bukanga Lonzo attracted a lot of international attention. And for that reason, its assessments became public eventually, even though there was an attempt to keep them quiet for a while. The Bukanga Lonzo project was a large-scale effort and a matter of great pride for the Congolese government.
This large-scale agricultural project is the first of its kind in Africa and was launched in February 2014. With this, the Democratic Republic of the Congo saw the development of its first agricultural business park at Bukanga Lonzo.
Now, it's important to look at the actual outcome. And a documentary has been put forward by one group analyzing what in fact happened at Bukanga Lonzo, entitled False Promises of Agro-Industrial Parks. The Bukanga Lonzo Agro-Industrial Park was conceived as a partnership. It's very interesting to see this, a partnership between the Congolese government and Africom Commodities, a South African company. Now, it's interesting, it's a South African agribusiness company, Africom, and in effect, they go into a bilateral agreement with the Congolese government. This is not an AGRA-supported project by the Gates Foundation, but it is a demonstration of what they think biotechnology can do for African agriculture. It was to be a pilot project for 22 such parks in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Just the first of 22. It was ultimately driven by the World Bank and the African Development Bank. So it had some big financial support behind it, in addition to being a joint project between South Africa and the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Banks designated the strategy for the agro-industrial parks, and they outlined it in great detail. They selected the sites and financed the feasibility and technical studies involved in implementing these plans. Straight from the African Development Bank Group. 80,000 hectares designated for the park are on the ancestral lands of the Teke and Lonzo communities in the Congo. The African Development Bank said that local support for the Bukanga Lonzo was unanimous, according to their own documents. But, as the analysts point out, it was a lie. The interviews make it clear when the analysts started interviewing local chiefs. We were asked to give our land to the establishment as an agricultural village, said this chief. However, we never agreed to an agro-industrial park. It was called an agricultural village. That's what they agreed to, not an agro-industrial park. Now, it's interesting to listen to the way they're describing it in the official French language of the time. They were saying not only will this development empower many Congolese citizens by the creation of job opportunities, but the promises they made of jobs for the youth did not happen, according to this chief. When our youth went to apply for a job, they were arrested and beaten. The park created at most 500 jobs in an area where tens of thousands lived previously. Hundreds were fired for striking. Their complaints: unsafe work condition, lack of drinking water, and lack of housing. At least one worker died from injuries on the job. The park sprayed chemicals like glyphosate, a known carcinogen. These chemicals, like glyphosate, including glyphosate, drained into the people's drinking and bathing water supplies. Despite the costly farming equipment, the project failed to meet projected yields year after year. Africom, the CEO, Christo Grobler, set up a mining venture on the territory that had been given him to look for diamonds and other minerals in the agro-industrial park. And in 2017, Africom left the project and it was shut down, basically. But the Democratic Republic of the Congo government, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank continued to talk about this as a success project. And they still want to create 22 agro-industrial parks on the same failed model. The park wasn't just a failure because of corruption and poor management. It fundamentally ignored the needs and potential of local farmers. The time has come to transform Congolese agriculture from a subsistence sector to a powerful engine of global economic development, according to Joseph Kabila. Subsistence was the target, but most rural Congolese were not subsistence farmers. There were entrepreneurs who earned 97% of their income from selling their products in local and national markets. They need better infrastructure, access to credit and seed, and fair prices for their produce. In 2009, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, released a comprehensive plan to help farmers improve their yields, incomes, and livelihoods. It was never implemented. Instead, the DRC embarked on a World Bank-sponsored agro-industrial park venture. Instead of financing the farmers, they financed the companies. The government should focus, according to this analysis, on real entrepreneurs, the DRC's farmers, not expatriate agro-industrial farm enterprises. What it amounted to was the analysis suggested that there were a whole lot of false promises. Similar to other projects in other parts of Africa, hundreds of millions of US dollars had been provided through the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa to selected African countries to promote high-yield seeds and petroleum-based fertilizer. In West Africa, hundreds of millions of US dollars provided through AGRA went to various countries like Mali, receiving 27.7 million, and to Ghana, receiving 74.4 million in subsidies to purchase these seeds and fertilizers. In East Africa, it was even more staggering. The total amounts in each country were larger, and places like Ethiopia received $34.2 million in subsidies, and Tanzania $77.1 million. When you add all these things up, you've got hundreds of millions of dollars being provided through the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa, funded by the Gates Foundation, in order to promote the distribution of high-yield variety seeds and the petrochemicals necessary to keep them alive. This is why the analysis called it false promises, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Sadly, Africa is not the only location for investment in this kind of petro-intensive green revolution agriculture. Tragically, we are witnessing a global land grab, a movement throughout the world driven by high-energy green revolution technology, a new kind of agriculture thought to follow on the tradition of Norman Borlaug.